Welcome to Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense.
Hello and welcome back to Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense with Dal, Lank, and Kathleen Salas-Bass of KLB Benefits Law Group. Dal and Kathleen help employers and benefit plan service providers navigate the complex legal requirements of employee benefit plans. With decades of combined experience in employee benefits law, they guide clients through compliance, corrections, IRS and DOL audits. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host, and today we're talking about optional features in retirement plans and how employers decide which ones make sense for their workforce. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me to discuss retirement plan options. Are you ready to dive in today?
Yes, thank you, Lisa.
Dal, what are the most interesting and popular optional plan features in employer retirement plans today?
I would say, just based on my anecdotal experience as an ERISA attorney, still the most popular plan optional feature, once you consider the ways of making contributions to the plan, all of it's optional in that sense. But putting aside the array of various contributions you can make, deferral contributions, employer match, profit sharing contributions, etc., the most popular optional feature is still the participant loan. This has been in place for many years, decades, and it is optional. An employer does not have to permit a participant in a plan to borrow from their plan account, but it's very common and it gets used a lot. Plans that do offer the participant loan definitely have people using them. So that's by far the most popular. There are some more recent innovations in retirement plans, again, optional features in plans that have been taken up as well by employers since they were added in recent years. But by far the most popular one is a participant loan.
And what are the pros and cons for the employer in deciding to offer optional features?
I think that the pros are clearly employee what's that called? Employee relations, the PR element. It's good for morale for people. It tends to be good for morale to allow employees to have access to things like participant loans and other features that are optional. And then the cons are the administrative burden on the employer in coping with and handling these optional benefits. It's somebody, either the plan professional administrator or the employer has to look at the different requirements and make sure that these optional features are being administered properly. Like all plan features, they present opportunities for compliance problems. So the employer has to be prepared to handle the workload.
And I would also add to that, I just sort of on the sort of the PR side of things, we actually hear from employers who have employees who hear about these things in the news, some new optional form of distribution or something, and they actually go to their HR person and say, I'd like to do Roth contributions, or, I want this, I've heard about this really this special kind of form of distribution, and I'd like to do that. And so that, employees will even advocate to their employer to add some of these options.
That's a really good point, Kathleen, that our employees can drive this. They can demand or request and kind of drive the direction the employers go.
Yeah, just a reminder, all employee benefit plans are optional in the ERISA world. So a private employer is not required to offer a plan. If they do, however, they have to, I guess the reason that they choose to do so often is for employee morale and retention, attracting employees with these benefits. And part of that is then the whole suite of available options could be appealing to their particular population. It depends on the employer for sure.
And I will say that, and I know, Dal, you're going to cover this, but, with Secure and Secure 2.0 in particular, there are a lot of optional, like ability to take some form of distribution in certain circumstances. And I know that a lot of employers, they would like to help out employees in those situations and offer those, but it also complicates their plan and the record keeping. And so, so far, I think, and I'll back me up on this, a lot of our clients are choosing not to add some of these new little forms of distribution because it does, add complication to the plan.
Yeah, I think a recent survey by a National Association of Plan Advisors found that 70% of employers had adopted the optional disaster relief provision, which is that's very popular in the country. This would be a national survey of a very large organization, so it would be a robust survey. It's reliable. That particular optional feature, which is a withdrawal, a distribution in the event of a federally declared disaster, is very popular, and it makes sense, right? People can, if they can get access to funds to help rebuild a home after a tornado, for example, if they can get access to their own savings, penalty-free and tax-free, and there's specific provisions in connection with repaying those distributions if you're able to. That access is very important to people because they don't have to worry about going to a bank or finding funds elsewhere. So those are popular, but the administrative hassle associated with them, with any feature of the plan, it starts to accumulate. And I think Secure 2.0, which was that's a nickname for a law that was passed in 2022, and has enacted many different provisions for retirement plans in the country, and included maybe 10 or 15 optional provisions that employers could add to their plans. That's a lot. And if an employer said, "Oh, I want all of them," 15 is a lot, or just say it's 12 optional features is a lot to add to the administrative burden of the employer. So they pick and choose. Do they want, which particular optional feature would they like to add?
And another factor is whether the third-party administrator and record keeper is able to do the record keeping. Sometimes, the employer wants to add the optional feature, and the third-party administrator they have isn't ready yet. They have to figure out how they're going to make it work. So, it's not just up to the employer as far as whether they want to, they want to do it, but they may have some roadblocks and delays.
Doll, there's one feature that I wanted to talk more about in Secure 2.0, where employers can make matching contributions to the retirement plan account of an employee who's making student loan repayments. How does that one work?
That's excellent. You said that exactly right. If a employee who is eligible for the plan is making student loan repayments to a lender, this is a separate transaction, right? They have student loan repayments, as many people do. Then the plan can be amended to provide for the employer the opportunity to match the payments that the person's making on their student loans, to match them in the 401k plan as though the employee was making salary deferral contributions. So the reasoning behind this is that a salary deferral contribution is an additional deduction from a person's payroll. If they're making student loan repayments at the same time, they might not be able to afford those salary deferral payments, deductions. And so then they just don't get the employer match, which is inside this plan and requires a deferral. They don't get that match because they're making these darn student loan repayments. So as a point of, again, appealing to employees who are in the situation, who are numerous in the country, the Secure 2.0 enabled employers to amend their plans to say, hey, you know what, if you're eligible for the plan and the plan has a 401k feature, which is a salary deferral feature, and you're not making salary deferrals, you can, if you're making student loan repayments, you can self-certify what those payments are, and we, the employer, will put money into your plan account as though you were making those payments as salary deferral payments. So if you're making $1,000 a month payments on your student loan, and the employer matches up to, say, a certain percentage of that. The employer will match that amount by putting a deposit into your 401k plan account, even though you're not putting deferrals in there. And it's great because you still are out of pocket on the student loan repayment, but you're getting an employer match, which is money. That's money that's yours inside your plan. It's fantastic.
I think somebody straight out of college would find that extremely attractive and appealing as part of their compensation plan. There's another area that I want to talk about, and that's the domestic abuse withdrawals. They're also part of the Secure 2.0 innovation. But what are they, and how do they work in practice?
Well, in practice, again, it's optional. So the employer who wanted to offer this feature would have to amend their plan document to provide it. And what it provides is the opportunity for the domestic abusive victim who is self-certifying to state to the plan that they need these funds, and there's a limit on the amount. I believe it's $10,000 per incident, to help them escape a domestic abuse situation. Basically, it's to give them money to go rent an apartment or to leave a bad situation, for example. And those funds they're taxable. It's a penalty-free but taxable distribution from your plan account. So it's the employee's money. They're taking it out. They need it for immediate expenses to help them with their domestic abuse situation. They're certifying to their employer or to their plan provider, at least somewhere on the record, that this is the situation. It's taxable. They would get a 1099-R saying that they have a taxable distribution from their plan, but there's no early withdrawal penalty imposed. And as they repay those, that up to $10,000, as they repay that over 3 years, they can get refunded on the tax that they've paid in the initial withdrawal. So that's the mechanics of it. And it's not a lot of money, but it's meant to be an emergency source of funds for somebody who is in dire need, of course.
And just to note that they don't have to repay it. It's an option if they want to repay it and can repay it, but they don't have to if they can't.
But the funds are available to them in a time of need. And I think that's another great feature of Secure 2.0. Last one I kind of want to ask about, and that is the catch-up contribution for older participants. How do they affect retirement savings for American workers?
Well, again, catch-up contributions are additional contributions that an employee can make from their salary. These are 401k contributions, salary deferral contributions, and they're optional. The employer plan doesn't have to offer the opportunity to make these additional contributions, but many of them do. And the catch-up is associated with age. It's age 50 and older are the workers. An employee who is 50 and older can make additional contributions if their employer's plan provides for it. And now there's a requirement that if the plan is offering catch-up contributions, then the catch-up contributions have to be on a Roth basis, which means that the employee making the deferral would be taxed on that additional amount contributed. So it's very powerful for Americans to have that opportunity to save more. Because when you're 50 and older and you're still working, but you're close to retirement, you could well be behind behind schedule, so to speak, in saving for your own retirement, and allowing an additional deferral limit, a higher deferral limit, gives Americans a chance to feather their nest on a tax-free basis. Now, the way Roth works is that you pay tax up front when the contribution is made, but you no longer, once those funds are in your plan account for 5 years, you no longer pay. You're not going to owe any income tax on any earnings that accrue to those Roth contributions. So, if you're 50 years old and you make a $10,000 Roth contribution, you hold that Roth contribution, you're taxed on that. It's as though it weren't a deferral. You owe tax on it when you pay write it in your payroll. but it's sitting there in your plan account waiting for 5 years to go by. And once the 5 years go by, if that $10,000 has earned $2,000 in interest, when you take that money out after 5 years, you will not owe you won't owe income tax on that $2,000 earnings. So you can imagine, if we're talking about larger numbers and longer periods of time for earnings to accrue, Roth can be very, very powerful. So it's a very helpful, it can be a very helpful optional feature for an employer to consider.
I just wanted to add that a lot of times we think of Roth as being something that's a little more favorable to younger participants because they have more time to accrue, and that means more savings that they get tax free. And this new requirement that applies to catch-up contributions doesn't sort of meet that criteria. There, a lot of times these older participants may not be very long before they take retirement. And, but let's be honest. I think what's happening is the IRS wants, they want to get their money, their taxes right away rather than deferring it. So I think that's one of the reasons behind that. But again, if you're starting catch-up contributions at age 50, you've still got time to really take advantage of it.
And Dal, what optional features tend to create the biggest administrative challenges for employers?
There's some interesting feedback and kind of fallout that have come from some of these. As Kathleen alluded to a moment ago, many of the provisions in the Secure 2.0 legislation were included in this legislation to help pay for it. Legislation has to be revenue neutral, and it can't cost the government money to enact these provisions. So the things like Roth provisions give the government a chance to say, the Congress, hey, we can pass this because it's going to earn the IRS some revenue in Roth contributions, and that helps us pass the bill. Well, so there's a bunch of provisions that have these different kinds of features, revenue generating features. And some of them, the way that they hit the road in reality is that the software for payroll providers in the country has to accommodate all kinds of new things that were never anticipated before Secure 2.0. And so the administrative hassles of dealing with payroll reporting and accurate deduction of income when a Roth contribution is made, for example, those can be very, very challenging. They were. In fact, the IRS put off enforcing the Roth provisions for the catch-up contributions, as an example. They delayed that by a year so that the payroll companies throughout the country could catch up and sort of organize their software to make these Roth contributions reportable and make sense. So there's some that are just that catch-up, Roth catch-up is popular. It's been adopted pretty readily throughout the country, but it's been something of a transition. I won't say it's a nightmare, but I mean and it'll pass. We'll get used to it. But it was tough getting and it's sort of what's the word, implementing it. So that's probably the biggest hurdle was the and there's some other Rothification things as well that were enacted in Secure that had similar effects on payroll.
I know I took advantage of some catch-up contributions, so I think it's more and more popular as our population is aging. We have many of us in a certain age group that we'd like to catch up. The economic times have maybe cost us some money in our retirement, or it didn't go as well as expected, and we want to make up that difference. So I think it's a great feature. I want to tie up this episode with an example. Can you share an example where an employer added one of these optional features, and what was the result? How did it benefit or harm their company, just from your experience, just to give our audience an idea of what it could look like?
Well, actually, one thing that springs to mind is something we haven't discussed yet, which is the qualified birth or adoption distribution. And that's similar to the domestic abuse, but for a different reason. It's a withdrawal from the plan account by a participant who is who's adopting a baby or has expenses associated with birth. And if the plan has this provision, then similar to the domestic abuse, the person can take the money out and choose to repay it, or if not, they owe tax on it. But it's for a specific purpose, and this birth, qualified birth or adoption. And it's very interesting. When this was enacted in the original Secure Act in 2019, this was brought into existence, and one of our employers was really eager to adopt it in their plan because they had several employees that really wanted to use this feature. So just as Kathleen said earlier, people were advocating to the HR departments in this group of employers that, I have these expenses. Can I please take advantage of this? And so they asked us specifically as their attorneys, can we, help us make this change in our plan because we really want to adopt this optional feature. And that was pretty dramatic. I wouldn't have thought that it would have been so popular and common, but here it was. Yes, it was very popular. So.
And if I remember correctly, it was, they elected to start it, and because of the record keeper not having systems set up yet, there was a long delay before it actually got officially ready to go.
Yeah, it took over 18 months to be operationalized, but they got there.
Yeah.
Ladies, I just want to thank you for shining light on this. And I know there are many more details to this. So thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Employee Benefit Plans and Business Sense. If your organization is reviewing retirement plan features or trying to decide which optional provisions make sense for your workforce, visit klblawgroup.com to connect with Dal and Kathleen. Be sure to leave a review, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.